You're listening to Simply the Best Sports Take, the best podcast breaking down the best stuff in sports with host Sean Bingham. His takes are so good, he dropped the mic, but then you wouldn't be able to hear him, and that would suck.
Welcome into STB Sports Take, Simply the Best Sports Podcast. I am your host, Sean Bingham. Thank you for being here, whether you're on YouTube, Google, Apple, Anchor, Spotify, wherever you're listening. Thank you for joining the podcast. Please hit that subscribe button. You guys, this is a very fun hobby for me, but I do want it to grow, and I do put a ton of time and effort into it. So thank you for supporting it. It honestly means a lot to me. And if you could hit the subscribe button no matter what platform you're on, I would love it. Thank you very much. Also, in the description, I'm trying to make sure this is clear to everybody because I want you guys to get the content that you want. And I know that sometimes when I listen to podcasts, I don't necessarily care about every single minute that the person's talking, but there are segments that I'm stoked on. So I've put in the description on every platform the exact time that I start a new segment. So feel free to look at the description, skip ahead, skip back, whatever you want. It's all about you guys getting your content. So a lot to get through today. A lot of interesting and fun action in the NBA last night. Going to do a little NFL talk as well with Julian Edelman retiring. But we're going to start with this. Very sad thing happened last night. Denver Nuggets star Jamal Murray went down. And right when he went down and I saw the clip, I actually had a note here that I put in. I put notes into my phone and then transfer them over to my computer. But I immediately put down a note. That looks like a torn ACL, MCL, something bad. It was like his knee just gave out as he was driving to the hoop. It was no contact injury. Immediately grabs his knee. That always spells trouble. And it was unfortunately confirmed this morning. Jamal Murray of the Denver Nuggets did indeed tear his ACL. He is out indefinitely. He'll certainly miss the rest of this season and the playoffs, probably even some of next season, which is just really, really sad for this guy. He's a rising star, and he was the reason that the Denver Nuggets came back last year on the Utah Jazz from that 3-1 deficit and beat them in the first round of the playoffs. I mean, he was the guy. He was dropping 50 points. Him and Donovan Mitchell just going back and forth. It was amazing. So very sad to see that, even as a Jazz fan, even as someone who knows that the Nuggets could be a huge threat. I've mentioned how the addition of Aaron Gordon made them a massive threat to do some damage in the Western Conference. I bumped them way up in my power rankings last week because of the addition of Aaron Gordon. Even knowing all of that as a Jazz fan, you don't want to see this happen. The NBA is so much better. Sports are so much better when the stars are playing. And now we've lost a star. The Denver Nuggets are going to take a huge hit. They'll probably still make the playoffs. But I could see them slipping all the way down to like that play-in game scenario, which is ridiculous. We're going to get into that in a minute. But they will do no damage in the playoffs. They might not even get past that play-in game scenario. I could see them losing that and not making the real playoffs. But even if they don't hit that play-in game or they somehow get past that, they will not win a series in the Western Conference. There's no way. The Denver Nuggets are done. So I've still got them in my power rankings, but they've taken a huge hit and slipped really far, and I won't fully punish them until we see what they do without Jamal Murray, but my prediction is that it won't be pretty. That's my prediction. So sad news out of the NBA for the Denver Nuggets, but the league goes on. So we're going to see what happens. It just is tough right now. We've got LeBron James out, Anthony Davis out, James Harden out. Now you're missing, we've already got Klay Thompson out. Now you're missing Jamal Murray. And these are all in the Western Conference, except for James Harden, of course, with the Brooklyn Nets. So I hate seeing injuries. It's not fun. It's not, and if you're a fan of a rival to the Nuggets, don't be cheering for this. Don't be cheering for this. So, okay, moving on. Sticking in the NBA, though. Last night, Ben Simmons was interviewed and asked about the rivalry, the potential rivalry, really, between the Nets and the 76ers. And here's what he had to say.
Hey, Ben, so a question about your upcoming opponent, the Brooklyn Nets. Do you feel that this rivalry with you guys and the Nets could become one of the premier ones in the league when it comes to rivalries?
This season or just in general?
In the future, for this season in the future.
Rivalry, if they keep that same team, definitely, but, it's going to be hard to do that. But, no, we're going for the past champs, the Lakers. They were the ones who won the championship, so you got to give the respect to them. Obviously, Brooklyn has a lot of talent, but at the end of the day, there's only one ball. You got to play defense too. So,
wow, did you catch that? At the end of the day, there's only one ball, and you got to play defense too. Ben Simmons, shots fired with the hot take. Jeez, We'll see if that comes back to bite him. I think it will, because the Nets are going to blow the 76ers out of the water if healthy. I'm going to get in. In fact, I'm going to do it right now. I had talked a lot about what I have said about the Brooklyn Nets, okay? And I've had some people say, after I drop them in the power rankings or I say Kyrie is a liability, which he totally is, they're like, well, you said the Nets are going to win it all. They're going to run away with it. Well, they are if I've put some huge caveats with it. And I've got the whole thing written down here of things I've said. If healthy, I've said if healthy. That's a huge if. Right now, they're not healthy. James Harden isn't playing at all. Kevin Durant's barely back from an injury. So if fully healthy, yes, I think the Nets will win it all. If they play at least 20-plus games together, all three of them, for the chemistry purposes. Because last year we watched the Clippers do this. Everyone got high on the Clippers. Everyone got stoked on the Clippers. They played 13 games together with their core starting lineup, and they didn't even make the Western Conference Finals. So you can't just put a bunch of stars together and expect it to work. So I've said from the beginning, they have to play at least 20. I actually started by saying they have to play at least 25 games together. I came back on it a little bit and said 20. So if they play at least 20 games together and they're healthy and Kyrie isn't a diva and understands his role, accepts his role, and doesn't just take unlimited PTO, those are the caveats for the Nets to win it all. If they can do those things, they've got to get guys back healthy. They need to get James Harden back, and they need to get all three of these superstars playing together for multiple games. Right now, they've played 7 games together. They need at least 13 more games together, I'm saying, for them to win it all. Now, if it's 18 or 19, or if it's 21 or 22, yeah, maybe they could still do it. I'm not going to say they couldn't. But to me, their chances go way, way down if they don't get at least 20 games together. And I really would say 25 is obviously better. The more you can get that chemistry going, the better. The Lakers have that chemistry. LeBron and Anthony Davis are like a match made in heaven. Andre Drummond is going to be just fine fitting into his role because he's not going to be as integral on the offensive side of things. He's going to be a rim protector and a rebounder and kind of an enforcer, if you will. But the Nets, it's 3 guys that are very ball dominant. You have to have chemistry going before that can really be successful. And they don't have that yet. They haven't had the time. So that's where I say there's a big if, And Kyrie, by the way, he needs to learn from Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard, had his demands in San Antonio. Didn't go over well. He goes to Toronto. They just kiss the ground he walks on and worship him. Let him do whatever he wants. He sits out like 22 games or something like that. I'm pretty sure he played 60 of the 82. So he sits out for 22 games, which is a huge amount. It's more than a fourth of the season. And they end up winning the title. So it's kind of like he can do no wrong. He can do whatever he wants. He's above the law. And, well, he goes and tries to do the same thing with the Clippers the next year. They don't have the team chemistry they need. They don't even make the Western Conference Finals. They're kind of a laughing stock because everyone had them, including Vegas, had them as the favorites to win the whole thing. They don't even make the Western Conference Finals. Well, this year, guess what? Kawhi's not taking so much load management, is he? He's taken some, but a fraction of what he has in the past. And so Kyrie needs to learn from that. You can't just expect to win because the media is saying you're going to. You can't just expect to win because Vegas says you're going to. If you don't ever play together, if you don't ever get that team chemistry, you're not going to win. So the Nets management needs to know that. The Nets players need to know that. If they're injured, sit out, get healthy. I fully am on board with that. But once you're healthy, come play. Don't keep sitting out longer for more rest and more health. And Kyrie, stop taking time off just for fun. Those are the caveats to the Nets winning it all. Okay? If the Nets can do all those things, that's how they win. But Ben Simmons says there's only one ball and you got to play defense. And guess what? He's right. And the only way for them to overcome that and to learn how to do that and to learn how to make it work is to play games together. And that's what I've been saying from the start. So that's how the Nets win it all. Okay, going to move on. Sticking in the NBA, though, again, there's the play-in game. For those that don't know how the play-in game works, it was introduced last year. It was a way to get the teams that were in the bubble that weren't going to get to finish the full season, give them a chance to make the playoffs and give them, therefore, a reason to go down to the bubble. So they basically said, look, teams 7 through 10 in each conference are going to play against each other for a chance to actually make the real playoffs, right? Secretly, It was just a way to try and make sure the Pelicans and Zion Williamson made the playoffs. We all know that. This whole thing was instigated so that Zion Williamson could make the playoffs. It didn't work. The Pelicans still missed the playoffs, and the NBA missed out on some ratings. But they've stuck with it this year, probably again to try and give Zion Williamson a chance to make the playoffs because they know the Western Conference is stacked, and they would like to, if they could get a series with Zion in it, they would love it. But I don't think that's going to happen again. But anyway, here's how it works. The 7 and the 8 team play against each other. The 7 hosts the game. Last year it was in the bubble, so that didn't apply. But this year, the 7 seed will host the 8 seed for one game. One game. Whoever wins that game is the official 7 seed in the playoffs. So basically, you can finish 8th and still be 7th. The whole regular season is negated by one game. It's kind of weird. I don't like it. The NBA already puts the entire league in the playoffs. See, here's the thing. The NFL has 32 teams, and they only put 14 teams in the playoffs. And that just got expanded from 12 to 14 last season. So the NFL was putting 12 out of 32 teams in the playoffs, making the playoffs truly valuable, making the regular season truly valuable. Now they've got 14 out of 32, and still less than half by quite a bit. The NBA has 2 fewer teams. The NBA has 30 teams. They're putting 20 of them essentially in the playoffs with this play-in game. The NBA is putting 20 of 30 teams in the playoffs with the play-in game because all the way through the 10 seed makes the play-in game. So the 7 seed hosts the 8 seed. They have the home court advantage. That's the advantage they get for being the 7 seed. But if they lose, they're out. The 8 seed becomes the 7. Well, they're not out. If the loser of that game then goes on to play the winner of the 9-10 matchup. So 7 and 8 play, 9 and 10 play. The higher seed hosts the game as a home game. If you win the 7-8 game, you're in the playoffs as the 7 seed. If you lose, you then host the winner of the 9-10 game for a chance for that 8 seed. So if you're the 7 or the 8 seed, you actually have to lose 2 games in a row in order to totally be out of the playoffs. And if you're the 9 or the 10, you have to win 2 games in a row in order to be in the playoffs. And if you're the higher seed, you get to host the game. So that's kind of how it works. There's 3 games, the 7-8 game, the 9-10 game, and then the loser of the 7-8 versus the winner of the 9-10. That's how it works. And those end up being the 2 games, or the 2 teams that fill the 7 and 8 spot. So I think the whole thing's ridiculous. They're already having too many teams in the playoffs. There's really no value in the regular season. The 8 seed never has a chance. I think we've seen it twice in the history of the league where the 8 seed won a series. And already in a 7-game series, and one of those times was when it was a 5-game series. I remember it was the Denver Nuggets beat the Sonics, and Dikembe Mutombo's on the ground, screaming at the ball. Because in a 5-game series, a little bit more can happen. You only have to win 3 times. A 7-game series, it's near impossible for the underdog to win. You got to beat a team 4 times. So the value of that is that you always get a true champion. It's very rare in a 7-game series that the better team doesn't win. The exception would be when injury happens, like with the Raptors and the Golden State Warriors a couple seasons ago in the finals. That's the exception. Injury happens, right? But in a 7-game series, the better team's going to win. So they already have 7-game series. The playoffs is almost as long at this point as the regular season if you win it all. I mean, you're literally looking, if you go to the NBA Finals, you're looking at really a minimum of 20 extra games. That's like a minimum. I mean, I guess if you steamroll through, you could win you got to win 16 games, right? So you could maybe steamroll through it like a 16-2 or something like that, but you're really looking at like 20 extra games if you go to the NBA Finals. It's a huge amount, right? Now they're adding this play-in game. And we just don't need it. We don't need it. If anything, I'd be all for a play-in game if they were going to eliminate a playoff spot or even eliminate 2 playoff spots and make it go, the 6, 7, and 8 battle it out for the final spots. But to have it be 7, 8, 9, 10 is too much. It's too much. So Mark Cuban, of course, his Dallas Mavericks are sitting in the 7 seed right now. They're exactly where you don't want to be. You're the best team that isn't actually fully in, right? So Luka Doncic and Mark Cuban both on record saying they think it's ridiculous. They have to play too much. It makes the regular season meaningless. It makes being the 7th seed or the higher seed meaningless. And Mark Cuban says that he has to play guys too many minutes. When you could be resting guys, you have to play too many minutes. Okay, Mark, I'm on board. And by the way, I've met Mark Cuban. I was on Shark Tank once. Cool story with my company Adventure Hunt. Kind of a fun little fact about me. So I've actually met Mark Cuban. Really nice guy. But Mark, I'm on board that the play-in game is ridiculous, that it shouldn't exist. It was a mistake. I agree with you. He said it was a humongous mistake or an enormous mistake. I don't remember what adjective he used, but he said it was a huge mistake, right? I don't disagree with him. It is a mistake because it devalues the regular season. It devalues the 7 and 8 seed. It kind of is just like everybody gets a participation trophy into the playoffs. But I totally disagree with his reasoning. His reasoning is that it makes him play his guys too many minutes. When you could be resting guys, you have to now play them to try and really get into the top 6 seed. Mark, are we forgetting where the money comes from? It doesn't come from you as the owner. It comes from us as fans. All of the money generated by the NBA is from fans sitting in seats at the arenas, buying concessions at the arenas, sitting on couches watching TV at home, going into stores and buying merch. Every single penny that you and the NBA players and owners and managers and employees earn, every dime of it, every cent of it comes from fans. And the fans want to see the stars play. So play the stars. They should play the stars. If anything, you made me think more highly of the play-in game with those comments because the stars should be playing. They should be playing. This is their job, and they're getting paid to do it by us as the viewing public. So I totally disagree with his reasoning. I agree that the play-in game is stupid, but I totally disagree with the reasoning. I think the NBA should look at eliminating a couple of teams from the playoffs and then having the play-in game if they want to have the play-in game. But it's already totally lopsided. I mean, we know right now, the teams that really have a chance. It's the Nets, it's the Sixers, it's the Bucks in the Eastern Conference. Nobody else has a chance unless there's injury. And in the West, we know that I would say the Nuggets are obviously out now, but I would say that obviously the Lakers, the Clippers, the Jazz, maybe the Suns. After that, come on, the Mavericks, they're not doing anything in the playoffs. They're not going to do anything in the playoffs. Maybe if they can sneak into that 6th seed, maybe they could, win a first-round series if they get lucky and the Suns drop to 3rd. But if they play the Clippers, they're done. They're not winning. They're not beating the Clippers. So to me, the play-in game, it is stupid. But to say that it's stupid because you have to play, I mean, Luka's like, oh, we have to play, and Mark's like, oh, we have to play Luka and Porzingis and. Well, duh. That's what you're getting. That's what all the money's for. We don't care about your bench guys playing. We didn't pay to watch them. So anyway, that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Okay, moving on to the NFL now. Julian Edelman retired, and everyone's wondering if he's a Hall of Famer. And I'm like, no, he's not a Hall of Famer. And I don't mean to rain on the parade. Julian Edelman was a great player on an even greater team. But Hall of Famer? Are we joking? No, he's not a Hall of Famer. He did win 3 Super Bowls. He was a Super Bowl MVP. And so that's why I think people are like, oh, is he a Hall of Famer? He had that fantastic catch in the Super Bowl where it's ricocheting off of everything. He's diving and scooping it up. It was one of those incredible Super Bowl moments, right? But the dude's 156th all time in receiving yards and 261st all time in receiving touchdowns. So you tell me, is that Hall of Fame worthy? No, it's not even close. Jim Plunkett won 2 Super Bowls as the starting quarterback for the Raiders and was Super Bowl MVP of one of those as a quarterback. Did not make the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Just because you're Super Bowl MVP does not mean you make the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Julian Edelman was never an All-Pro. He was never even a Pro Bowler. He was just a great player on an even greater team. Reggie Wayne has been eligible for the Hall of Fame for 2 seasons, has not made it in yet. He still obviously could, but to put into perspective, he's 10th all-time in receiving yards. Julian Edelman is 156th. Reggie Wayne was a 6-time Pro Bowler, made the All-Pro team once, first-team All-Pro, also won a Super Bowl, and is 25th in receiving touchdowns. Julian Edelman is 261st. So that's a guy that didn't make it in his first 2 years of eligibility. 10th in receiving yards, 25th in receiving touchdowns, won a Super Bowl, was a Pro Bowler 6 times, was first-team All-Pro once. Didn't make the Pro Football Hall of Fame in his first 2 years of eligibility. So no, Julian Edelman will not make the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and he shouldn't. After this season, we've got guys at the receiver position like Steve Smith, Andre Johnson, and Anquan Boldin are up for eligibility. All of those guys are currently in the top 15 in receiving yards. So Julian Edelman, I think it's going to be a long shot that he makes the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Maybe the 3 Super Bowl victories puts him over the top, but my money would be heavily on him not making the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and he shouldn't make the Pro Football Hall of Fame. No offense to him. Again, a very, very great player. A very good player on a very, very great team. So congratulations to Julian Edelman on a fantastic career. Not a Hall of Fame worthy career, but a great career nonetheless. Okay, back to the NBA, power ranking time. A couple of quick things from last night, though. We talked, obviously, about Jamal Murray, how sad that was. We talked about Ben Simmons and his hot take about the Nets only having one ball and you got to play defense. I agree with him. We'll see if they can do it. But the Nets-Timberwolves game actually was postponed last night. Everything in Minnesota was postponed. There was another tragedy with police shooting, so they postponed the game. We'll see when that gets made up. Also last night, the Wizards managed to beat the Jazz at home. The Wizards snapped the Jazz 24-game home winning streak. What have I been saying about the Wizards? How weird is this team? They play good teams and they win. They play bad teams and they suck. Of course they would go and beat the Jazz at home, meaning in Utah. Of course they would. Russell Westbrook with a triple-double. The dude's averaging a triple-double, and he didn't even make the All-Star game. The dude is averaging a triple-double. Nobody talks about him unless it's to say that he sucks. And he didn't make the All-Star game, and he's averaging a triple-double. It's unbelievable. This guy's a walking triple-double. But it doesn't seem to equate to wins this year. I don't know why. It did when he was at OKC. He was able to drag teams to the playoffs as a number one. They weren't going to advance in the playoffs. That was the problem. And now with Bradley Beal, they're not really doing much. They're underachieving, like humongously underachieving. I don't know how they're so low in the rankings, but they are. But of course they beat the Jazz. Okay, so into the power rankings. The Jazz are still number one. I'm going to go through these relatively quickly. The Jazz are still number one. They've got the best record in the league. They have the best point differential in the league. They have the best record against teams that are 500 or better, and everybody's healthy and playing. So there's no reason for me to drop the Jazz from the number one spot just because they lost to the Wizards at home last night. They're number one, and they're going to stay number one until something changes. But again, point differential, record against quality opponents, health. Jazz are tops in all four of those categories. Number two, Phoenix Suns. They're basically number two in all those categories. They have the second best record, the second best point differential, the third best record against plus 500 teams, and they're also very healthy and playing at a high level, and we don't see injuries or drama or anything like that. Number three, I have the Clippers. They actually have the second best record against quality opponents. They're playing really well. They seem to be gelling. They were a team that everyone thought was going to win it all last year. I think they're starting to win me over a little bit more and more, especially now that their nemesis, the Nuggets, are out. The Nuggets, of course, knocked them out of last year's playoffs. Without Jamal Murray, the Nuggets have no chance, and so maybe that bodes well for the Clippers. It probably does bode well for anyone that would have to play the Nuggets because they were a good team. Clippers at number three. Number four, I have the 76ers, and then at number five, I have the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets, of course, are dealing with an injury to James Harden, a diva in Kyrie Irving, lack of team chemistry, and those are the things holding them back. As they get those together more and more over the coming weeks, I think you'll see them climb in my rankings back to number one, because if those things happen, I see them as the runaway favorites. But they better get it going quick because time is of the essence for the Brooklyn Nets. In the meanwhile, the 76ers are a half game up in the East, and so I've got them one spot ahead of the Nets because they're now back healthy. There isn't any drama in Philly. I like Doc Rivers as a coach. There's good things going on in Philadelphia if you're a 76ers fan. Number six, I have the Lakers. I had them last week down at number 8. Andre Drummond, I said from the beginning that Andre Drummond was the better pickup than LaMarcus Aldridge was. Again, LaMarcus Aldridge, of course, went to the Nets. Andre Drummond went to the Lakers. We had Lisa Roger on the podcast, and she thought that LaMarcus Aldridge was the better player. Maybe she was just being nice because she's a Lakers fan. I said that to me, LaMarcus Aldridge just has the better career. But right now, this season, no question, Andre Drummond's the better player. And that is being proven true. It wasn't initially. Andre Drummond had like the rough start, with his toe or whatever it was. But he just ate LaMarcus Aldridge up in that game the other night. I think he's going to prove to be a really strong addition to the Lakers. And that big win against the Nets did mean a little bit to me to bump them up just a couple of spots. Plus, we know Anthony Davis and LeBron James are coming back healthy. So Lakers at number 6. Bucks at number 7. They're 4-6 in their last 10. I don't know what's going on in Milwaukee. This is a team that was like tops in the East for the last couple seasons and just couldn't seem to get over the hump in the playoffs. We thought this year might be the year. Giannis extended his contract, all these things. They made some adjustments to the roster. They're trying different things on defense, but it's not looking great for them. I'd say they're the third best team in the Eastern Conference, and they're going in the wrong direction, so I dropped them down to number 7. Number 8, Portland Trailblazers. I had them last week at 10, and they've not played great of late. They're 6-4 in their last 10, but I do like the Blazers. I do. Like, they're on paper, it seems like they should be really, really good. They added Norman Powell. They got a healthy Yusuf Nurkic back, a healthy CJ McCollum back, Dame at MVP levels, Carmelo Anthony, fantastic off the bench. Feels like they should be better than they are. So I'm putting them in that lower half of these top 10 rankings, but we'll see what they can do. And then and the reason also that I bumped them up is because I had to bump the Nuggets way down, and that's who I've got next is number 9, the Nuggets. The Nuggets are in big trouble without Jamal Murray, and that was the biggest reason for bumping the Blazers up, actually, is that the Nuggets had to come down. And so the Nuggets take the number 9 seed. Again, I'm not going to penalize them too heavily. I had the Nuggets clear up at number 5 last week, and they were like climbing. But you lose your second best player in Jamal Murray and your floor general, if you will. Jokic can do it, but he's a big guy. And they did add, Aaron Gordon, but without Jamal Murray, they're in big, big trouble. So I've dropped them all the way down to number 9. I'm guessing you'll see them exit the top 10 entirely by the end of the season, but we'll see what happens over the coming games. Then at number 10, I have the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas Mavericks they've lost 2 in a row. And so I dropped them down just 1 spot from last week. They were number 9. But this is a team that is kind of similar to the Blazers, where like on paper, it feels like they should be really good. I talked about how when they signed Porzingis, I thought they were like one solid piece away from being title contenders. But in today's league, that's just not the case at all. But they're there. They're worthy of a playoff spot. They'll make the playoffs. I think even if they do get into the playoff or the play-in game scenario, I think they'll advance. So that's who I had in the 10 spot. So that's the STB Power Rankings for the NBA. Last thing I want to wrap up with is this. Steph Curry last night drops 53 points and becomes the all-time leading scorer in Warriors history, franchise history, passing the great Wilt Chamberlain. So big, big deal for Steph. He was very humbled. You can see here on the video if you're on YouTube. He was very, very humbled, very honored, got the game ball afterwards. Really big deal. What was crazy, though, is you look up and you see what Wilt did, and Wilt did it in 6 seasons. Steph did it in 745 games, 12 seasons, to 429 games, 6 seasons. So it took him 316 games more to score the same number of points that Wilt did. Nearly double. Wilt was averaging like 50 and 40 and 37. Steph is averaging a career high 30.4 points per game this season. That's how dominant of a scorer Wilt Chamberlain was. The game's obviously evolved quite a bit. Congrats to Steph Curry, all-time leading scorer in Warriors franchise history. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining. Please hit that subscribe button. You guys are awesome. I will see you mañana. I am out. Peace.
Thanks for hanging with Simply the Best Sports Take. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and check out STBSportsTake.com. Simply the best in sports.
'Cause we are